3 seconds. That's all Avelina Thorne had before Caspian Drake's eyes found her in the pulsing darkness of the onyx pearl. 3 seconds before he dragged her back into the hell she'd spent 6 months clawing her way out of. She didn't think. Thinking took time she didn't have. She saw the most dangerous man in the room, a man sitting alone in a shadow that felt colder than the rest of the club, and she made a choice that would cost her more than her freedom. The bass rattled her teeth. Manhattan's most pretentious underground lounge was loud enough to drown out screams, but it wasn't loud enough to silence the panic rising in her throat like bile. Friday night in the meatpacking district, the air thick with expensive perfume desperation and bad decisions. Avelina adjusted the strap of her thrifted black dress. The fabric was thin, too thin for October, but it was all she could afford on a library assistant's salary. She'd only come because Maya had dragged her, insisting that 25 was too young to live like a nun. One drink Maya had promised before disappearing into the throng of bodies 20 minutes ago. Just one drink and we leave. Avelina checked her phone. 11:42, no text from Maya. But when she looked up, her blood turned to ice water in her veins. Across the room near the velvet ropes guarding the entrance, a man was arguing with the bouncer. He wore a fitted navy polo that showed off hours in the gym, the same shirt she'd bought him for his birthday, 3 months before the restraining order. Caspian. He wasn't supposed to be in the city. The court order said 500 feet minimum, but a piece of paper couldn't stop a man like Caspian Drake. He was charming to police officers, terrifying to her. His eyes scanned the crowd with predatory precision. He was hunting, and somehow he knew she was here. 2 seconds. Avelina spun, slamming her shoulder into a waiter carrying champagne flutes. Glass shattered. The waiter swore. She mumbled an apology and ducked her head, weaving through the crowd. She couldn't go to the exit. Caspian was blocking it. Her eyes darted left. Kitchen door guarded by a mountain of a man with an earpiece. Right. The VIP section. The VIP section at the Onyx Pearl wasn't just roped-off booths with bottle service, it was elevated. A dais of black leather and obsidian tables separated from the common floor by a wall of sheer glass and two security guards who looked carved from granite. And in the center, occupying the largest booth entirely by himself, sat a man who looked like he owned the night. Avelina froze. Even through her panic, he was impossible to miss. He wasn't watching the dancers gyrating on platforms. He wasn't scrolling his phone. He sat perfectly still, one hand resting on a crystal tumbler filled with dark amber liquid, staring straight ahead with an intensity that felt unnatural. Wrong. He wore a suit, charcoal gray, impeccably tailored, Italian probably. His dark hair was swept back from a face that was too sharp, too pale, too devastatingly handsome to be real. High cheekbones that could cut glass, a jaw carved from marble by an artist who understood cruelty. He looked bored, dangerous but bored. 1 second. Caspian pushed past the bouncer. He was inside. Avelina's fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, but she did neither. She froze. If she ran, he'd see the movement. If she stayed, he'd find her. She needed camouflage. She needed a shield. Her eyes snapped back to the man in the charcoal suit. The guards at the VIP entrance were distracted, stopping a group of influencers trying to talk their way past the ropes, their phones out begging for table space. This was her only chance. Avelina moved. She didn't walk. She glided, fueled by pure adrenaline and animal fear. She slipped past the influencers, ducked under the arm of the distracted guard, and suddenly she was inside the glass enclosure. The sound changed instantly. The club music dampened to a dull thrum. Quieter here, cooler. The air smelled of expensive leather, sandalwood, and something metallic, like ozone before a storm, or copper. She took 3 steps toward the booth. The man in the suit didn't blink, didn't turn his head, but she saw his hand tighten slightly around the glass. 0. Caspian was scanning the bar. In 2 seconds, he turned toward the VIP section. Avelina didn't let herself think about consequences, didn't think about who this man might be. Mob boss, CEO, someone who could destroy her with a phone call. She just needed him to be a prop, a human shield. She walked right up to him, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, and before he could signal his guards to throw her out, she dropped onto his lap. She draped her arm around his shoulders, burying her face in the crook of his neck to hide her profile from the floor below. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling so hard she wasn't sure he heard it. "Just for a minute, please don't let him see me." The contact was shocking. He was cold. Not cool like someone who'd been outside in October. Cold like stone in winter. Like touching a statue. Under the expensive fabric of his suit, his body was hard as granite, unyielding. He didn't breathe. She realized with a jolt that his chest wasn't rising and falling. For a terrifying second, she thought he might be dead, some kind of mannequin. Then slowly she felt a large, cold hand come to rest on her waist. It was possessive, heavy, the weight of ownership. "Who are we hiding from?" His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through her chest, deeper than any voice she'd ever heard. It sounded like gravel grinding together, sophisticated but ancient, like a cello played in a cathedral. "My ex," she breathed into his collar, her lips nearly touching the frigid skin of his throat. "He's at the door. Blue shirt." She risked a glance downward through her lashes. Caspian was looking right at the VIP booth, his eyes narrowed. He saw a woman on a rich man's lap, saw dark hair, but he couldn't see her face. Not with the angle, not with the glass reflecting light. He hesitated. The man beneath her shifted slightly, turned his head, his nose brushed against her hair. She smelled it then. Not just cologne, something underneath. Iron, rust, blood. "The one with the desperation reeking off him," the man asked, his tone almost conversational. "The one who looks like he breaks things he cannot control." Avelina pulled back just an inch to look at him. Up close, he was terrifying. His eyes were the color of burnt espresso, almost black, but there were flecks of gold in them that seemed to swirl, catching the low light. And his pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris like black holes. "Yes," she whispered. "Interesting." He didn't look at Caspian. He looked at her. His gaze dropped to her throat, watching the frantic pulse of her carotid artery, the vein jumping under her skin like a frightened rabbit. "You have a very loud heart, Avelina Thorne." She stiffened. Her hand tightened on his shoulder. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer immediately. He simply raised the glass to his lips, taking a slow sip. The liquid inside was too dark to be whiskey, too thick. His eyes never left hers. "I know many things," he said softly, each word precise. "Deliberate. I know you are terrified. I know you are reckless. And I know that by sitting here on the lap of Dorian Nightshade, you have just insulted every predator in this city who knows better than to approach me." Dorian Nightshade. The name sounded familiar. Old money? Real estate maybe? Or tech? She didn't know. She didn't care. "I'm sorry," she stammered, trying to stand up, blood rushing to her face. "I just panicked. I'll go." His hand on her waist tightened, not painful, but immovable. She was pinned. "No," Dorian said, a cruel smirk touching the corner of his lips. It didn't reach his eyes. "You wanted a shield, little bird. You shall have one. But everything comes with a price." He looked past her down to the club floor. Caspian had started walking toward the VIP stairs. The security guard stepped forward to block him, but Caspian was shouting something, pointing at the booth, his face red, veins bulging in his neck. "He is coming," Dorian noted casually as if commenting on the weather. He took another sip of his drink. "Shall we see how brave he really is?" The air inside the glass enclosure seemed to drop 10 degrees. Avelina's breath misted in front of her face. She tried to scramble off his lap, but his grip was iron. "You chose this seat," he murmured, his cold breath against her ear. "Now you stay in it." "He's going to cause a scene," she hissed, panic flaring again. "He has a gun. I think he has a gun in his car." Dorian chuckled. It was a dark, dry sound, humorless. "A gun," he repeated as if the word amused him. How quaint. Below them, the confrontation escalated. Caspian was red in the face, screaming at the stone-faced security guard. Avelina caught snippets of his voice through the glass. "That's my girlfriend. Get out of my way." "He calls you his," Dorian observed. His thumb traced a slow, rhythmic circle on her hip bone through the fabric of her dress. The touch burned cold. "Do you belong to him?" "I don't belong to anyone," Avelina snapped, a flash of her old spark returning despite the fear. Dorian's eyes gleamed. The gold flecks seemed to glow. "Good answer." Suddenly, Caspian shoved the security guard. It was a mistake. The guard didn't budge. But the commotion drew eyes. The club manager was rushing over, clipboard in hand, trying to defuse the situation. Dorian didn't wait for the manager. He simply lifted one finger. It was a small gesture, barely a twitch of his hand. But the effect was immediate. The two massive guards at the bottom of the stair grabbed Caspian by the arms. Caspian thrashed, looking up at the booth. His eyes locked onto Avelina through the glass. He saw her face now. "Sophie!" he screamed. Wrong name. He always got it wrong when he was angry. "Sophie, get down here. Who is that freak?" Get away from him. Avelina flinched instinctively, burying her face back into Dorian's shoulder. The scent of him filled her nose. Cold rain, old libraries, and underneath it all, that metallic tang of blood. Look at me, Dorian commanded. It wasn't a request. Avelina lifted her head, meeting his eyes. Do you want him gone? Dorian asked, his voice soft now, almost gentle. But there was something underneath, something hungry. Permanently. The question hung in the air between them. Heavy, loaded. I just want him to leave me alone, she whispered, her throat tight. I want him to forget I exist. Forget, Dorian mused. He turned his attention to the scene below. That can be arranged. He locked eyes with Caspian. Even from this distance, 20 feet up and behind glass, the effect was visceral, immediate. Caspian stopped struggling. He went rigid. His mouth hung open mid-shout. His eyes glazed over, pupils dilating until they swallowed the color. Dorian's lips moved, barely a whisper. But the sound seemed to echo directly inside Avelina's skull, bypassing her ears entirely. Leave. Down below, Caspian blinked. His aggressive stance collapsed. He looked confused, disoriented. He looked down at his hands, then back up at the booth. The rage was gone, replaced by a dull, vacuous terror. He shook off the guards, turned around, and walked out the front door without looking back. Just like that. Gone. Avelina stared slack-jawed, her heart pounding in her ears. How did you do that? She breathed. He has a weak mind, Dorian said dismissively. He finally released his grip on her waist, easily suggested. Avelina scrambled off his lap. Her legs shook so badly she had to grab the edge of the obsidian table to stay upright. The surface was cold under her palms. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dorian stood up. He was tall, well over 6 feet, towering over her even in her heels. He buttoned his suit jacket with slow, deliberate movements, each button sliding through its hole with precision. I'm the man who just saved your life, he said, his voice flat, matter of fact. And now I believe we have a transaction to settle. Transaction? Avelina stepped back. I can buy you a drink or pay for the bottle, whatever that costs. Dorian laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time, rich and dark like bitter chocolate. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The cold air around him seemed to push against her skin. He smelled of rain and old blood. He reached out, his cold fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch made her shiver violently. Goosebumps erupted down her arms. I have wine in my cellar older than your country, Avelina Thorne, he murmured, his face inches from hers. I do not need money. Then what? Her back hit the glass wall. Nowhere left to go. You sat on my throne, he said softly, leaning down so his breath ghosted across her lips. You used my reputation as armor. In my world, that is a debt, and I always collect. He checked the heavy platinum watch on his wrist, the kind that cost more than a car. My car is waiting out back. You will accompany me. I'm not going anywhere with you, Avelina said, trying to sound brave. Failing. I'm calling an Uber. Your Uber will take 10 minutes. Dorian's smile vanished. His expression turned cold, clinical. Caspian is confused, not lobotomized. The suggestion I planted will wear off in 5 minutes. He will remember where you are. He will be waiting in the parking lot, and he will be very, very angry. Avelina's blood ran cold. However, Dorian continued, offering her his arm like a gentleman from another century. My car is armored, my driver is armed, and I live in a fortress. If you want to survive the night, you will walk out of here on my arm, just as boldly as you sat on my lap. He waited, his expression unreadable. The choice is yours, little bird. The wolf at the door or the monster in the high tower. Avelina looked at the exit, then at Dorian. She thought of Caspian's rage, the bruises she'd covered with concealer for 6 months, the way he'd choked her until she saw stars. She looked at Dorian's hand, pale, elegant, cold as death. She took it. His fingers closed around hers, strong, possessive. Good girl, he whispered. The heavy metal door of the club's rear exit slammed shut, cutting off the thumping bass instantly. The silence of the alleyway was deafening. It was raining now, a cold, miserable New York drizzle that slicked the cobblestones with oil and neon reflections. Avelina shivered. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her shaking and exposed in her thin dress. Cold? Dorian asked. He didn't wait for an answer. He shrugged off his charcoal suit jacket. The movement was fluid, almost liquid. He draped it over her shoulders. The jacket was heavy, tailored from wool that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. But it was the temperature that shocked her. It wasn't warm from his body heat. It was room temperature, as if no one had been wearing it at all. The inside smelled intensely of him. Ozone, cedar, and that faint metallic tang of iron. "Thank you," she mumbled, clutching the lapels tight around her. "Do not thank me yet," he replied, his voice flat. "Civility is not kindness. It is simply protocol." A car idled at the curb. It was a black Mercedes Maybach. The windows tinted so dark they looked like voids, like you could fall into them and never come out. A driver stood by the rear door, a man with a shaved head and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He wore a black suit and gloves. He opened the door the moment Dorian approached. "Home, sir," the driver asked, his voice gravelly, American accent contrasting with Dorian's transatlantic polish. "Yes, Elias, and take the Palisades route. I want to see the river." Dorian gestured for Avelina to get in. She hesitated, looking down the alley. She could run 3 blocks to the subway station, lose herself in the crowds. But she remembered his warning. 5 minutes. Caspian would remember in 5 minutes. She got in. The interior of the car was like entering another world. Cream leather seats, ambient purple lighting, complete silence. The door thudded shut behind her, sealing them in a vacuum. Dorian slid in beside her. He left a respectful distance between them, but the air in the car felt pressurized by his presence. Heavy. He tapped a screen on the center console. A glass partition slid up, separating them from the driver. Complete privacy. "Drink," Dorian said. He opened a small refrigerated compartment and pulled out a bottle of water. He cracked the seal himself and handed it to her. Avelina took it. Her hands trembled. She took a sip. The water was cool and grounding. Real. "So," she said, finding her voice, trying to sound normal. "You're a rich guy who likes to rescue damsels in distress. Intimidate other men. Is that your thing? An ego trip?" Dorian turned his head slowly. In the passing streetlights, his face was a landscape of sharp angles and shadows. He looked amused, but there was darkness in that amusement. "You think I did that for my ego?" "You enjoyed it," she challenged, surprising herself. "I saw your face. You liked scaring him." "I despise bullies, Avelina." His voice was quiet, dangerous. "And I despise waste. That man Caspian Drake, he is a waste of oxygen. He treats you like property because he has no value of his own." Avelina flinched. "You check background reports fast," she muttered. "I don't need reports to see the bruises on your soul." His eyes dropped to her left arm. "Or the faint yellowing of the one on your upper arm." Avelina instinctively covered her left arm with her hand. The bruise was 2 weeks old, faded, barely visible even under the club lights. How had he seen it? "Who are you?" she asked again, louder this time. "And don't say Dorian Nightshade. What are you to?" Dorian looked out the window. The Hudson River flashed by, dark and churning. The lights of New Jersey on the far shore like fallen stars. "New York is a city of ghosts," he said softly. "Some of us just linger longer than others." He turned back to her. For a second, a flash of headlights illuminated his eyes. They weren't just dark. They were endless. "I am a businessman, Avelina. I deal in acquisitions, real estate, artifacts, and occasionally rare moments of opportunity." "Is that what I am?" Her voice shook. "An opportunity. You are a curiosity," he corrected. "You sat on the lap of a predator to escape a scavenger. That shows instinct. I like instinct. It is rare in this century. Most people are sheep waiting for the slaughter." The car slowed. They were turning off the highway, heading toward the winding roads of the Palisades. Leaving the city limits, Avelina's heart rate spiked. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My estate. It is in Alpine, close enough to the city to see the lights, far enough to not hear the screams." "The screams," Dorian smiled, showing teeth that were perfectly white and slightly unsettlingly sharp. "The sirens, Avelina. The city noise." He raised an eyebrow. "You are very literal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. It wasn't hers. It was a sleek black device. "Your phone," he said, holding out his hand, "is likely being tracked. If Caspian is as obsessive as he smells, he has software on it. Give it to me." Avelina clutched her purse. "It's my life, my contacts, all my photos. Give it to me." The command wasn't shouted, but it hit her with physical force. Like a pressure wave, her hand moved on its own, pulling her cracked iPhone out of her bag and placing it in his palm. Dorian rolled down his window. The wind roared into the quiet cabin, cold and biting. Without hesitating, he tossed her phone out onto the highway. Hey, Avelina screamed, lunging for the window. The window rolled up, smooth, silent. It is done, Dorian said calmly. He wiped his hand with a silk handkerchief from his pocket. You are now invisible. No digital footprint, no snap map, no GPS, no tracking apps Caspian installed while you slept. You had no right, she choked out, angry tears pricking her eyes. I just bought you freedom. You're welcome. Avelina slumped back against the leather seat. She felt stripped, naked, vulnerable. But a tiny part of her, a part she hated, felt a weight lift off her chest. Caspian couldn't call her, couldn't text her threats at 3 in the morning, couldn't find her through her phone's location. What now? She whispered. Dorian rested his head against the seat, closing his eyes. He looked exhausted, or perhaps just hungry. Now, he murmured, we go to the one place where rules do not apply, and we discuss the price of your safety. You said you didn't need money. I don't. His eyes snapped open, locking onto hers. Black pools with gold fire at the center. I need something much more personal. The Nightshade estate was not a house. It was a statement of dominance. Perched on a cliff edge overlooking the Hudson River and the distant, twinkling skyline of Manhattan, the structure was a brutalist masterpiece of concrete, steel, and floor-to-ceiling glass. It looked like a villain's lair from a movie, stark and imposing against the night sky. The Maybach rolled through iron gates that were at least 20 feet high. As they crunched over the gravel driveway, Avelina saw armed guards patrolling the perimeter with Dobermans. Do you have a lot of enemies? She asked, staring at a guard with an assault rifle. When you have been alive, as long as I have, Dorian said cryptically, you accumulate detractors. Alive as long as I have. The phrasing was strange, but before she could question it, the car stopped. Elias opened the door. Avelina stepped out into the crisp night air. The house was silent. No crickets, no birds, just the wind coming off the river, carrying the scent of water and stone. The massive front doors opened before they even reached them. The same man who'd driven them stood in the entryway. But he looked different now, more formal. Butler, not driver. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair, and a posture so rigid he looked like he'd swallowed a coat hanger. He wore a pristine black suit. His face was expressionless. Good evening, Master Nightshade, the man said, his voice dry as parchment. He glanced at Avelina. His expression didn't change a millimeter. And guessed. Elias, Dorian nodded. He handed the butler his jacket as he walked in. Prepare the blue room for Miss Thorne, and have the kitchen send up a tray. Rare steak, iron-rich greens, red wine. For the lady, sir, Elias asked, an eyebrow raising slightly. For me, the lady will have... Dorian paused, looking at Avelina. What do you eat besides salad? I'm not hungry, Avelina said, hugging herself. The foyer was enormous. A double staircase swept up to a second floor. A chandelier hung above them that looked like a storm of falling ice crystals. She is in shock, Dorian told Elias. Bring her hot tea, chamomile, and brandy. Very good, sir. Elias vanished into the shadows of a hallway. Dorian walked toward a massive living area where a fireplace the size of a small car was roaring. He gestured for her to follow. Sit, he commanded, pointing to a velvet armchair near the fire. Avelina sat. The heat of the fire began to thaw her frozen limbs. She pulled Dorian's jacket tighter around her shoulders. Dorian went to a wet bar in the corner. He poured himself a dark red liquid from a crystal decanter. It looked too thick to be wine. So, Avelina said, looking around, the walls were lined with art. Not modern abstract pieces, but oil paintings. Old ones. Portraits of people in Elizabethan collars. Landscapes of battles that looked centuries old. You live here alone, with Elias and a few others who maintain the grounds. Solitude is a luxury. He walked over and stood by the fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows on his face, making him look like something carved from stone. A statue come to life. He took a sip of his drink. Avelina, he said, we need to establish ground rules. Rules are, you are safe here, from Caspian Drake. No human can breach these walls without my permission. He set the glass down on the mantelpiece. But you are not safe from me. Avelina's breath hitched. Are you going to hurt me? Dorian laughed, a low, humorless sound. Hurt you, no. I have no interest in breaking you. But I am not a safe man, Avelina Thorne. I have appetites, needs, and a temper that I have spent a lifetime controlling. He stepped closer. The price for your stay is simple. You will be my ears during the day. Your ears. I cannot enter certain places during daylight hours, Dorian said carefully. I have a severe photosensitivity condition. An allergy to sunlight, if you will. Avelina stared at him. The pieces were clicking together in her mind. The cold skin, the lack of breathing, the way he'd controlled Caspian with a word. The two sharp teeth, the drink that looked like blood. "You're a vampire," she said. She meant it as a joke, a sarcastic deflection. But Dorian didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He just stared at her, his pupils blowing wide again, eclipsing the brown iris until his eyes were black pits. "The modern world is so quick to label," he whispered, stepping even closer. "Vampire, hemophobe, monster, god." He stopped right in front of her chair. He placed his hands on the armrest, trapping her. The cold air around him pressed against her like a physical force. "If I were a vampire, Avelina," he said softly, his face inches from hers, "would you run?" Avelina looked at his mouth, at the vein pulsing in his neck. She thought about the cold skin, the strength, the compulsion at the club. "I can't run," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. "You threw my phone on the highway." Dorian smirked. "Smart girl." He leaned in, sniffing the air near her neck, his nose brushing against her skin. "You smell of fear and vanilla, cheap perfume, and underneath that, something sweet, rare." He pulled back suddenly, before she could scream. "I need a liaison," he said, returning to business tones. Cold, professional. "My business rivals are making moves against my holdings during daylight hours. I need someone who can walk into a boardroom, or a brunch, or an auction, and listen. Someone who looks innocent. Someone who looks like a victim. You want me to be a spy? I want you to be my daytime proxy. In exchange, you live here. You eat my food. You wear clothes that I will buy for you because that dress you are wearing is offensive to the architecture. And most importantly, Caspian Drake never touches you again." Avelina processed this. It was insane. This man was clearly delusional, or part of some elaborate cult, or actually a vampire, which was impossible. But then she thought of Caspian. She thought of the police officer who told her, "It's just a domestic dispute, ma'am. Unless he hits you again, we can't arrest him." She looked at the fire. Then she looked at Dorian. "What if I say no? Then Elias drives you to the nearest bus station. You go back to your apartment. You wait for Caspian to break the lock." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. "I'll do it," Avelina said. Dorian smiled. This time it reached his eyes. It was a terrifying transformation. He looked predatory, satisfied, like a wolf that had just cornered prey. "Excellent." At that moment, a soft chime echoed through the house. Dorian frowned. He looked at a digital panel on the wall. His expression darkened instantly. "What is it?" Avelina asked, sensing the shift in the room. "The gate intercom," Dorian hissed. "Someone is at the outer perimeter. Someone who wasn't invited." "Caspian at—" Avelina gasped, standing up. "No," Dorian said, his voice dropping to a growl that didn't sound human. "Caspian is a nuisance. This is a calamity." The heavy oak doors of the living room swung open. Elias stood there. For the first time, he looked rattled, his face pale. "Sir, Elias said, his voice trembling. "It's her." Dorian went perfectly still. "Seraphine." "Yes, sir. She says she knows you have a girl in there. She says she wants to play." Avelina looked between them. "Who is Seraphine?" Dorian turned to Avelina. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a look of genuine urgency. "Seraphine Bloodworth is my maker," Dorian said grimly. "The vampire who turned me 317 years ago. And unlike your ex, mine has been hunting me for centuries. And she doesn't use guns." He grabbed Avelina's hand. His grip was freezing. "Run upstairs. Second door on the left. Lock it. Do not open it until I come for you, even if you hear me screaming." "What?" "Go!" he roared. The sound wasn't human. It was a shockwave that rattled the windows and knocked paintings off the walls. Avelina didn't argue. She hiked up her dress and ran for the stairs, her heels clicking frantically against the marble, just as the front door of the mansion exploded inward with a deafening crash of splintered wood. But Avelina didn't make it to the second floor. She couldn't. The sounds coming from the foyer below were too terrifying, too confusing, too visceral to ignore. She crouched behind the heavy mahogany railing of the mezzanine, peering down into the chaos. Dust from the shattered front doors swirled in the air like thick fog. Through the haze, a woman stepped inside. She was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. She wore a long coat of dark crimson leather that looked like it had been stitched together from something organic. Skin, maybe. Her hair was platinum blonde cut into a sharp, violent bob. Her lips were painted blood red, matching her coat perfectly. She didn't hold a weapon. Her hands were empty, but the air around her fingers shimmered, heat radiating from them, melting the oxygen itself into visible waves. Dorian, the woman purred. Her voice was like silk sliding over a razor blade. You changed the locks. That's very rude. After 3 decades of silence. Dorian stood in the center of the ruined foyer, shielding the staircase with his body. He looked relaxed, hands in his pockets, but Avelina could see the tension in his jaw, the coiled violence in his stance. Seraphine, Dorian replied, his voice devoid of warmth. You look warm. I see you're still playing with matches. And I see you're still playing with food, Seraphine shot back. Her eyes darted up to the railing where Avelina was hiding. Avelina ducked, heart hammering. Ihe, but she knew she'd been seen. I can smell her, darling, Seraphine called out, her voice louder now, mocking. She smells like panic and cheap vanilla. Is that what you've reduced yourself to? A babysitter for mortals? Leave, Dorian warned. The temperature in the room plummeted, his cold aura clashing with her heat, ice against fire. You are not welcome in my territory. Seraphine laughed. It was a high manic sound. Your territory, I made you, Dorian. Everything you have is because I allowed it. She flicked her wrist. A ball of blue fire materialized in her palm, hissing, alive. She launched it across the room. Dorian moved faster than Avelina's eyes could track. 1 second he was standing still. The next he was a blur of charcoal gray. He intercepted the fireball, swatted it aside with the back of his hand as if it were nothing. A fly. The fire slammed into an antique tapestry on the wall, instantly incinerating it. Still slow, Seraphine teased. She lunged. The fight that followed wasn't like anything in movies. It was brutal, fast, and eerily silent. There were no grunts of exertion, only the sound of breaking furniture and tearing fabric. Seraphine was a whirlwind of fire and claws. Dorian was a wall of ice and stone. Seraphine struck him across the chest, her nails tearing through his suit and shirt like wet paper. Avelina saw blood, dark, almost black spray across the floor. Dorian didn't flinch. He grabbed Seraphine by the throat and hurled her across the room. She smashed into the heavy oak dining table, splintering it into kindling. She was up in an instant, snarling, her human mask slipping to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. Give her to me, Seraphine shrieked, her voice distorting into something demonic. I want to taste what makes her so special. She sprinted toward the stairs, toward Avelina. Dorian roared, a sound that shook the foundation of the house. Chandeliers swayed, windows cracked. He intercepted Seraphine at the bottom step, tackled her. They rolled across the floor, a tangle of limbs and violence. Seraphine's hands were glowing white-hot now. She pressed her palms against Dorian's chest. Smoke rose. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Dorian groaned, a guttural sound of agony. But he didn't let go. He was holding her down, taking the burns, keeping her away from the stairs, away from Avelina. Avelina couldn't just watch. He was burning for her, dying or whatever the vampire equivalent was for her. She looked around frantically. A lamp, a chair, too light. Her eyes landed on a heavy bronze bust of Julius Caesar sitting on a pedestal near the mezzanine edge. It must have weighed 40 pounds. Avelina grabbed it. It was heavier than she expected, straining her arms. But she lifted it. Over the railing, below Seraphine had the upper hand. She was straddling Dorian, her burning hands hovering inches from his face, ready to melt his eyes. Say goodbye, my love, Seraphine hissed. Hey, Avelina screamed. Crazy bitch. Seraphine looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. Avelina dropped the bust. Gravity did the rest. The bronze head fell 20 feet and clipped Seraphine's shoulder with a sickening crack. Bone shattered. The impact knocked her sideways, breaking her concentration. The fire in her hands sputtered out. Dorian seized the moment. He surged upward, grabbed Seraphine by her broken arm and the back of her neck. With a heave of superhuman strength, he launched her toward the shattered front doors. She flew through the air like a rag doll, crashed onto the gravel driveway outside. Dorian stood up, swaying slightly. His shirt was burned away, his chest a mess of charred skin and black blood. He walked to the doorway, his silhouette framed by moonlight. If you ever come back, he bellowed into the night, his voice echoing across the estate. I will not just break your bones, Seraphine. I will tear your head from your shoulders and mount it on these gates. A screech echoed from the darkness. Pain and rage mingled together. Then the sound of retreating footsteps, unnaturally fast, fading into the woods. Silence returned to the nightshade estate. The only sound was the crackling of small fires Seraphine had started on the rugs. Dorian turned around. He looked up at the mezzanine, his face pale, his eyes wild and dark. He took one step toward the stairs and collapsed to his knees. Avelina flew down the stairs. She didn't care about the smoke or the destruction anymore. She ran to him, sliding on her knees across the polished floor to catch him before he slumped completely. Dorian, she grabbed his shoulders. His skin was scorching hot where Seraphine had touched him, but freezing cold everywhere else. "Oh my God, you're hurt. You're really hurt." "I am fine," he wheezed, his voice like gravel rattling in a tin can. "Just need rest." "You are not fine. You have a hole in your chest," Avelina yelled, panic rising. She looked at the wound. It was nasty. A charred black handprint seared deep into his pectoral muscle. It wasn't bleeding anymore. The heat had cauterized it, but the tissue looked dead. Necrotic. "Elias!" Avelina screamed. "Elias, help him!" The butler appeared from the shadows of the kitchen hallway. He held a fire extinguisher in one hand and a medical kit in the other. He looked remarkably calm. "I have the situation under control, Miss Thorne," Elias said. He sprayed the extinguisher on a burning rug, putting out the last of the flames, then walked over to them. "Master Nightshade heals quickly, but burn wounds from a maker, those are stubborn." "A maker?" Avelina asked, helping Elias prop Dorian up against the wall. "She turned me," Dorian gritted out, his eyes squeezed shut. 300 years ago, New Orleans. She has a fiery disposition." "Shut up," Avelina said, her voice trembling. "Save your energy." Together they moved him to the library, which had survived the brawl mostly intact. They laid him on a large leather sofa. Elias opened the medical kit, revealing not bandages and antiseptic, but jars of strange dark salves and vials of thick red liquid. "I can attend to him, miss," Elias said. "No," Avelina said. She surprised herself. She took the damp cloth Elias offered. "I'll do it. You go fix the door or check the perimeter. Make sure she doesn't come back." Elias paused. He looked at Avelina, assessing her. A small, barely perceptible smile touched his lips. "Very well, Miss Thorne." He set the kit down and left the room, closing the heavy doors behind him. Avelina was alone with the monster. She knelt beside the sofa. Dorian was watching her, his eyes half open, the blackness receding slightly to reveal the brown irises again. He looked vulnerable. It was a strange look on a predator. "This is gonna hurt," Avelina whispered. She dipped the cloth in a bowl of water Elias had left, began to gently clean the soot from around the burn. Dorian hissed, his hand gripping the leather cushion so hard his fingernails punctured the material. "Why didn't you run?" he asked, his voice strained. "I told you to lock the door." "I don't listen well," Avelina murmured, focusing on her task to keep her hands from shaking. "Besides, she was going to kill you." "She can't kill me, only slow me down." "She dropped a fireball on your chest, Dorian. That looked pretty fatal to me." Avelina reached for the jar of salve. It smelled of earth and herbs and something metallic. She applied it to the burn. Dorian arched his back, a low growl escaping his throat. It wasn't just pain. It was a sound of intense sensitivity. Avelina froze. Her hand was resting on his bare chest, right over his heart, or where his heart should be. She waited. Thump, thump. It was there. Very slow, maybe 10 beats a minute, but it was there. "You're staring," Dorian whispered. Avelina looked up. His face was inches from hers. The pain seemed to be receding, replaced by something else. Hunger. The scent of her blood, pumping fast from adrenaline, filled the small space between them. "You saved me," she said softly. "At the club, and now here." "Why?" Dorian reached up. His hand cool again cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed over her bottom lip. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight down her spine. "Because," he murmured, his eyes dropping to her throat, then back to her eyes. "You are the first thing in a century that has surprised me, Vaughn. When you dropped that statue, you didn't look like prey, Avelina." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You looked like a queen." Morning came too soon. Avelina woke in the blue room. Navy silk sheets, a bed so soft it felt like sleeping on clouds. She'd fallen asleep still wearing her thrifted dress, too exhausted to change. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She sat up disoriented. There was a knock at the door. "Miss Thorne?" Elias's voice, calm, professional. "Breakfast is ready, and Master Nightshade requests your presence in the training hall at 9. Training hall. Avelina looked at the clock on the nightstand. 8:30. She scrambled out of bed. Found a bathroom attached to the room that was bigger than her entire studio apartment. Marble everywhere. A shower with 6 heads. Heated floors. On the counter, someone had laid out clothes, black leggings, a fitted long-sleeve shirt, soft leather boots, all in her size. She showered quickly, the hot water washing away the smoke and fear from last night. When she emerged, she found Elias waiting in the hallway. "This way, miss." He led her through a maze of corridors. The estate was even larger in daylight, Gothic and modern at once. Stone walls, steel beams, art that looked centuries old hanging beside contemporary pieces. They descended stairs into what must have been a basement, but it didn't feel like a basement. The ceilings were 20 feet high. The space was temperature controlled, lit by soft, indirect lighting. The training hall was massive. Mats covered the floor, weapons lined the walls, swords, daggers, stakes, things she didn't have names for. Dorian stood in the center. He wore all black, simple clothing that looked tactical. His chest was bare under an open vest, revealing the burn on his pectoral. It was almost healed now, just pink scar tissue. He was not alone. A woman stood beside him, tall, elegant, ancient. She wore a gown of midnight blue that looked like it cost more than a car. Her hair was silver pulled back in an intricate braid. Her skin was porcelain white. Her eyes were the color of winter ice. She radiated power. "Avelina Thorne," the woman said, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "I am Lady Morgana Ashencroft, and you have created quite the problem." Avelina froze at the bottom of the stairs. Dorian stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Avelina and the woman. "Lady Morgana is the head of the Council of 13, Dorian said, his tone respectful but wary. "She has jurisdiction over all vampires in the eastern seaboard." "The Council," Morgana continued, circling Avelina slowly like a predator, assessing prey, "has become aware of your existence. A human who sat on our king's lap in a public establishment. A human who witnessed a maker's attack. A human who now resides in his estate." She stopped directly in front of Avelina. Up close, Morgana's eyes were terrifying. They held the weight of centuries. The cold calculation of something that had outlived nations. "This is unprecedented and dangerous." "She saved my life," Dorian said quietly. "That," Morgana replied, "is precisely why she is dangerous. A human who can act against a vampire as old as Seraphine Bloodworth is either exceptionally lucky or exceptionally valuable. The Council wishes to determine which." Avelina found her voice. "What happens if I'm lucky?" Morgana smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Then you die. We cannot allow knowledge of our kind to spread. Even lucky humans are loose ends. And if I'm valuable, then you live. Under very specific conditions." Morgana snapped her fingers. Elias appeared from the shadows carrying a silver tray. On it sat a crystal bowl filled with dark red liquid. Fresh blood. Steam rose from it, still warm. Avelina's stomach turned. "The trial is simple," Morgana said. "You will sit in a chair, 5 feet from Master Nightshade. For 10 minutes you will remain still while he stands before this bowl of fresh human blood. Typo negative, a rare delicacy for our kind." She paused for effect. "If Dorian can resist drinking for 10 minutes while you sit before him, your fear and adrenaline pumping through your veins, then you have proven you possess value, control, purpose. If he loses control and drinks from the bowl, or worse from you, then you are simply prey, and prey does not survive in our world." "And what happens to us if he drinks?" Avelina asked. "Both of you are executed," Morgana said matter-of-factly, "for violating the first law. No vampire shall reveal themselves to humans unless that human is to become one of us. Since Master Nightshade has not turned you, he has violated this law. The only exception is if you prove useful enough to warrant protection." Avelina looked at Dorian. His face was expressionless, but she saw his jaw tighten. "When is this trial?" she asked. 72 hours from now, at the council chambers." Morgana turned to leave. "I suggest you spend that time wisely, Miss Thorne. Learn what you can, because if you fail, your education ends permanently." She vanished. Not walked away. Vanished. One moment she was there, the next, she was simply gone. A trick of the light and shadow. Avelina exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding. "That was the council," Dorian said. He walked to the weapons wall, pulled down 2 silver daggers. "They are not known for their mercy." "Will you be able to resist?" Avelina asked. "For 10 minutes?" Dorian looked at her. Really looked at her. "I do not know," he admitted. "Your blood sings to me, Avelina. It has since the moment you sat on my lap. Every beat of your heart is a drum calling me to feed. Normally I could resist. But you are different. Your blood is not just sustenance. It is something I cannot name. Then why haven't you bitten me already? Because I want you willing, not compelled, not terrified. He tossed her one of the daggers. She caught it, surprised by its weight. Which is why we have 72 hours to teach you how to shield your mind, to quiet that drum so I can think clearly. Is that possible? We are about to find out. The training was brutal. For 3 days, Avelina barely slept. Dorian taught her to build walls in her mind, to visualize barriers of crystal, of ice, of iron, to slow her heartbeat through breathing, to mask her fear with calm. It was meditation mixed with psychological warfare. Picture a wall, Dorian instructed. They sat cross-legged on the mats, 5 feet apart, made of something solid, something that cannot be penetrated. Avelina closed her eyes, imagined a wall of blue crystal, thick, impenetrable. Good. Now hold it. Dorian released a wave of compulsion. She felt it like pressure against her skull. A voice in her head whispering, open, yield, submit. The crystal wall cracked. Again, Dorian said. They repeated the exercise hundreds of times. Each time, Evelina's wall grew stronger, thicker, the cracks smaller. And Elias taught her combat, how to hold a dagger, how to strike. Where vampires were vulnerable, silver through the heart, decapitation, fire. You will never be stronger than them, Elias said, correcting her stance. But you can be smarter, faster in the moment of surprise. On the second day, Avelina managed to hold the crystal wall for 5 minutes while Dorian pushed against it. On the third day, she held it for 15. But the trial wasn't the only threat. On the afternoon of the second day, Avelina received a visitor. She was in the library reading a book about vampire history that Elias had provided when a man was announced. Thaddeus Ravencroft, to see you, miss, Elias said, his tone carefully neutral. Hupema, a business associate of Master Nightshade. He insisted on speaking with you privately. Dorian was asleep. Vampires slept during the day in sealed chambers. She was alone. Should I tell him no? That, Elias said, is your decision. But Master Nightshade would want me to inform you that Mr. Ravencroft is not to be trusted. Avelina considered, then decided. I'll see him, but stay close. As you wish. Thaddeus Ravencroft entered the library like he owned it. He was handsome in a polished way, tanned, fit, late 40s with silver at his temples. He wore an expensive suit, Rolex on his wrist, smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Thorne, he said, extending his hand at him. I apologize for the intrusion. I'm Thaddeus Ravencroft, CEO of Ravencroft Holdings. Avelina shook his hand. It was warm, normal body temperature, not a vampire. Mr. Ravencroft, what can I do for you? Please call me Thaddeus. He sat in a chair without being invited. I'm here as a concerned citizen. I've heard you're residing with Dorian Nightshade, and I feel obligated to warn you. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, set it on the table between them. This is a compilation of missing persons reports. 15 women, all between the ages of 22 and 30. All were last seen in the company of Dorian Nightshade between 1950 and 2020. Avelina opened the folder. Inside were photocopied police reports, photographs, articles from old newspapers. Her blood ran cold. Nightshade is not what he seems, Thaddeus continued, his voice smooth, sympathetic. He is a predator, and you, Miss Thorne, are exactly his type. Vulnerable, isolated, beautiful. Why are you telling me this? Because I've spent 30 years tracking vampires, documenting their crimes, building cases. He leaned forward. I can protect you, get you out of here safely. And if you're willing, help me bring Nightshade to justice. I have resources, safe houses, legal teams, and I'm prepared to offer you $5 million for your cooperation. Avelina looked at the folder, at the faces of 15 women. What kind of cooperation? Testimony, evidence from inside his estate, anything that can help us build a case. Thaddeus stood. I know this is overwhelming. Take the folder, think about it, but don't take too long. Women like you, Miss Thorne, they don't last long in Nightshade's world. He left his business card on the table, gold embossed. Call me when you're ready to be free. After he left, Avelina sat alone with the folder. 15 faces stared back at her. She waited until dusk, until she heard movement upstairs. Dorian waking. She found him in his chambers, a massive room with blackout curtains, a bed that looked unused. Vampires didn't sleep like humans. We need to talk, she said. Dorian was buttoning a fresh shirt. He looked at the folder in her hands. His expression darkened. Thaddeus Ravencroft paid you a visit. He says you killed 15 women. I did not kill them, Dorian said quietly. He gestured for her to sit. But he is not entirely wrong. Those women died because of me. He poured himself a drink from a decanter, the dark red liquid. For 200 years, I searched for a way to create a child, a vampire heir. I was lonely, Avelina. Desperately, pathetically lonely. Seraphine was my maker, but she was obsessed with controlling me. I wanted family, someone who chose to be with me, not someone bound by blood magic. He stared into his glass. I tried 15 times, found women who seemed compatible, strong, healthy. I turned them each one hoping they would survive the transformation. None did. Their bodies rejected my blood. They died in agony within hours. Why didn't you stop after the first? Because I am a monster, Dorian said simply. And monsters are selfish. Each time I told myself the next one would be different. The next one would survive. But incompatibility is biological. No amount of hope changes chemistry. He looked at Avelina. Until you. Your blood does not reject mine. It harmonizes with it. You are the first person in 3 centuries whose blood I can tolerate without causing harm. That is why you are valuable. That is why you are dangerous. Avelina processed this. Ravencroft wants me to help him kill you. I know. Thaddeus has been trying to destroy me for 30 years. Dorian paused. He has his reasons, personal ones, but his methods are questionable. What reasons? That, Dorian said, I suspect we will discover soon enough. Avelina stood, walked to the window. Outside the estate grounds were bathed in moonlight. Guards patrolled with dogs. Peaceful, deadly. I'm staying, she said finally. Why? She turned to face him. Because monsters don't apologize. And you just did. 15 times. The day of the trial arrived. Avelina woke before dawn, showered, dressed in the clothes Elias had laid out. Simple black pants, white blouse, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. She looked at herself in the mirror. 25 years old, library assistant, abuse survivor, and now somehow sitting in judgment before a vampire council. Her life had become impossible, but she was still here, still breathing, still fighting. The council chambers were not in New York. They drove for 2 hours, north into the Catskill Mountains, to an estate even larger than Dorian's, a sprawling Gothic mansion that looked transplanted from Victorian England. The Council of 13 waited in a circular room, 13 chairs arranged in a perfect circle. 12 were occupied. The 13th, directly opposite the entrance, was empty, waiting. Lady Morgana sat in the tallest chair. She nodded as they entered. Dorian Nightshade, Avelina Thorne. The trial begins. 2 chairs were brought forward, placed in the center of the circle, 5 feet apart, facing each other. A silver tray was set between them on a pedestal. The crystal bowl filled with fresh blood. The scent hit Avelina immediately. Copper, salt, life. She saw Dorian's pupils dilate, his nostrils flare. The rules are simple, Morgana announced. 10 minutes. Master Nightshade may not drink from the bowl. He may not drink from Miss Thorne. He may not leave his chair. If he does any of these things, both are executed immediately. She raised a hand. Miss Thorne may use any mental defenses she has learned. She may speak if she wishes, but she may not leave her chair either. If she runs, the trial ends in failure. A large hourglass was turned. Red sand began to fall. Begin. The first minute was easy. Dorian sat perfectly still, eyes closed. Breathing slow, controlled. Avelina visualized her crystal wall, thick, blue, impenetrable. The second minute, Dorian's hands gripped the armrests. She could see his jaw clenching, the tendons in his neck straining. Third minute, sweat beaded on his forehead. Impossible for a vampire. But there it was. Fourth minute, his eyes opened. They were completely black, pupils blown so wide there was no iris left. Just endless void. He was staring at her throat, at the pulse jumping under her skin. Avelina felt the pressure against her mind, the compulsion, stronger than anything in training. Open, yield, let me in, let me drink. Her crystal wall cracked. Fifth minute. Avelina, his voice was strained, barely human. Talk to me about anything. I need distraction. What do you want me to say? Tell me about your life, before all this. Sixth minute, Avelina spoke, her voice shaking but clear. I worked at the New York Public Library. 3rd floor, archives. I cataloged old manuscripts, documents from the 1800s, letters from soldiers in the Civil War. Seventh minute. Dorian leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white. Keep talking. I lived alone, studio apartment in Queens, could barely afford it. I ate ramen most nights, but I was happy. Free. After Caspian, freedom was everything. Eighth minute. Dorian stood up. The council shifted, hands going to weapons. But he didn't move toward the bowl or toward her. He simply stood, fists clenched, facing away. I can smell you, he growled. Your fear, your heartbeat, every molecule of your blood calling to me. It is torture, Avelina. Beautiful, perfect torture. Ninth minute. Avelina stood too. Look at me, she commanded. Dorian turned. His face was a mask of suffering. Fangs fully extended, eyes black, veins visible under his pale skin. You are stronger than this, she said. You have survived 300 years. You can survive 10 minutes. I cannot. You will. 10th minute. Dorian rushed forward. Avelina flinched, certain he was about to bite her. But he dropped to his knees in front of her chair, buried his face in her lap, hands gripping the sides of her chair, not touching her, just holding on for dear life. Avelina's hand moved without thinking. She placed it on his head, fingers threading through his dark hair. Breathe, she whispered. Just breathe. The hourglass emptied. The last grain of red sand fell. Time, Morgana announced. Dorian collapsed backward, gasping, trembling. The blackness receded from his eyes, color returning, fangs retracting. He did not drink, one of the council members observed. She did not run, another added. Morgana stood. The trial is complete. Avelina Thorne has proven value. She possesses purifier blood confirmed by her resistance to compulsion and Master Nightshade's unusual reaction. She is granted provisional protection under the Second Covenant. She looked at Avelina. You may remain with Dorian Nightshade, but you are now bound to our laws. Speak of our kind to any unauthorized human, and you forfeit your life. Betray the council, and you forfeit his. Do you understand? I understand. Then you are dismissed. In the car ride home, neither of them spoke. Dorian sat as far from Avelina as possible, staring out the window, his jaw tight. You're angry, she said finally. I nearly killed you. His voice was flat, dead, in front of the entire council. I nearly lost control and drained you dry. But you didn't. Only because you touched me. He turned to look at her, his eyes haunted. At the 9th minute, I was gone. The monster had won. But then you placed your hand on my head, and suddenly I could think again. I could breathe. He looked down at his hands. What are you, Avelina Thorne? What is in your blood that unmakes me so completely? I don't know. Neither do I, and that terrifies me. They arrived at the estate just after midnight. Avelina was exhausted, emotionally drained. She wanted to sleep for a week. But Elias met them at the door, his face grave. Master Nightshade, you have a visitor. He has been waiting for 3 hours. He says it is urgent. Who came? Caspian Drake, sir. Avelina's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. He should be in the hospital. He was discharged 2 days ago, Elias said quietly, and he is currently on the front lawn, wearing what appears to be an explosive device. They rushed to the security monitors. There on the screen was Caspian. He stood in the circle of light from the gate lamps. Haggard, thin, wild-eyed, and strapped to his chest was a vest covered in wires and blocks of clay-like substance. C4, he was shouting at the camera. Avelina, I know you're in there. Come out, or I swear to God I'll blow this whole place to hell. Dorian's face hardened. I will handle this. No, Avelina said. She grabbed his arm. He's here because of me. I'll handle it. He has a bomb. I know. She looked at Elias. You taught me how to disarm explosives. Remember day 2, the hypothetical scenario. That was theoretical, Miss Thorne. Then let's make it practical. Before Dorian could stop her, Avelina walked out the front door. She crossed the lawn slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. The guards had their weapons trained on Caspian, but they couldn't shoot. The bomb was dead man's switch. If he died, it detonated. Caspian, Avelina called out, her voice steady. It's me. I'm here. Caspian spun. He looked terrible, skin sallow, eyes sunken. He'd lost 20 pounds. The psychiatric hold had not been kind. Avelina, his voice cracked. You left me. You just disappeared. You broke into my apartment. You violated the restraining order. Because I love you, he screamed, tears streaming down his face. I love you, and you replaced me with that freak. He gestured wildly at the mansion. Do you know what he is? Do you know what they did to me? Avelina took another step closer, 10 feet away now. Who did something to you, Caspian? Ravencroft. The man in the suit. He found me at the hospital, said he'd help me get you back. But he did something. Put something in my head. Caspian grabbed his skull. I can hear it buzzing all the time. Buzzing and voices, and it won't stop. A chip. Thaddeus had implanted a chip. I can help you, Avelina said softly, but you need to let me close. Let me see the vest. You'll run. You always run. I'm not running anymore. Avelina took the final steps, close enough to touch. Caspian was sobbing now, broken. He said you'd come. He said you'd walk right out, and then I'd just have to press the button. He said it would be over. We'd both be free. Avelina looked at the vest. 3 wires, red, blue, green. In training, Elias had taught her red is always live. Green is usually dummy. Blue is the trigger. But Thaddeus would know that. He'd reverse it. Caspian, she said gently, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. Look at me. He met her eyes. I forgive you, she said, for everything, the bruises, the fear, the pain. I forgive you because you're sick, and sick people need help, not punishment. You forgive me. I do. Caspian's hand moved away from the detonator. I'm so tired, Avelina. I'm so tired of being angry. Then rest. In one smooth motion, Avelina reached for the vest. Her fingers found the green wire. The dummy. She pulled. Nothing happened. She grabbed the red wire. Live current. She felt the shock but yanked it free. The detonator went dead. Caspian collapsed into her arms, unconscious. The chip in his brain finally burning out from overload. Dorian and Elias rushed forward. They carried Caspian inside, called an ambulance. As they loaded him into the medical transport, the EMT turned to Avelina. You saved his life. That vest was live. Military grade. He's going back to the hospital. Psychiatric facility. We found the implant. We'll remove it surgically. He'll face charges, but his lawyers will argue diminished capacity. He'll probably spend years in treatment instead of prison. Avelina nodded. As the ambulance drove away, she felt something crack open inside her chest. A weight she'd been carrying for 2 years, lifting. Caspian couldn't hurt her anymore. She'd faced him, forgiven him, and walked away. 3 days later, Dorian presented her with an engraved invitation. The Met Gala. You're taking me to the Met Gala, Avelina said flatly, looking at the heavy cardstock. I am taking you to war, Dorian corrected. The Met Gala is where Manhattan's elite gather, including Thaddeus Ravencroft. He will make his move publicly, and you will be ready. How? We're going to expose him before he exposes us. The night of the gala, Avelina stood in front of a mirror in the blue room, barely recognizing herself. The dress was deep red silk, the color of fresh arterial blood. It clung to her figure like water flowing down to pool at her feet. The back was open, exposing her shoulder blades and spine. Around her neck, a choker of raw, uncut rubies, each stone the size of a marble. Dorian's gift. You look lethal, a voice said behind her. Dorian stood in the doorway, black tuxedo, diamond cufflinks, hair swept back. He looked like old money and new danger combined. I look like I'm pretending, Avelina said. Good, that's the point. He crossed to her, adjusted the choker slightly, his cold fingers brushing her throat. Thaddeus thinks you're a victim. Prey. Tonight you show him what prey becomes when it grows teeth. The Met was lit up like a cathedral. Red carpet stretched up the iconic steps, photographers everywhere, celebrities, politicians, the elite of New York society. And somewhere in that crowd, Thaddeus Ravencroft, they entered together. Dorian's hand possessive on the small of Avelina's back. Eyes turned, whispers rippled through the crowd. Who is she? Where did Nightshade find her? Inside the Great Hall? Champagne flowed. Music played. 500 people mingled under soaring ceilings and priceless art. Avelina felt exposed, vulnerable. Then she saw him, Thaddeus Ravencroft, standing near a marble column, watching her with predatory interest. He approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Thorne, you look radiant. I see you've declined my offer. I did my research, Avelina replied coolly. Found it interesting that Ravencroft Holdings has been acquiring medical facilities, fertility clinics specifically, obstetric wards. Thaddeus's smile tightened. Diversification, standard business practice. And the pregnant women who disappear from those facilities, also standard. His eyes went cold. You're making accusations you can't prove. Am I? Avelina nodded to Elias standing near the stage. The butler pressed a button on a small remote. The massive screens throughout the hall flickered to life. Thaddeus's face went white. On the screens, hospital records. Elias had hacked them. 23 women, all admitted to Ravencroft-owned facilities. All pregnant. All disappeared within days of giving birth. And beside each record, a photograph of a child. Teenagers and young adults now. All with the same distinctive features. Fangs that grew too long. Eyes that reflected light. Strength beyond human. Dampier, half human, half vampire. An army. You're not hunting vampires, Avelina said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. You're creating them. A new species, stronger than humans, able to walk in daylight, loyal only to you. She turned to address the crowd. Thaddeus Ravencroft is a Dampier himself, born in 1974 to a human mother and vampire father. He's spent his life recruiting vampires to create more like him, building an army to overthrow both vampire and human society. To create a new world order where Dampier rule everything. She pulled out a vial, drew it from her clutch. This is my blood, type O negative. But it's not normal blood, it's purifier blood. 1 in 10 million. It neutralizes vampire venom, makes Dampier sick, weakens them. She held it up like a weapon. I'm your worst nightmare, Ravencroft. And I'm standing right here. Thaddeus's composure shattered. He lunged forward. Security moved to intercept, but he was fast. Dampier fast. He grabbed Avelina's wrist, squeezing hard enough to crack bone. But before he could do more, Dorian was there. He didn't punch Thaddeus, didn't throw him, simply placed one hand on the Dampier's shoulder and squeezed. Thaddeus screamed, his shoulder crumpled, bones shattering. Dorian's strength was inhuman, absolute. Touch her again, Dorian said softly, and I will not stop at your shoulder. But instead of waiting for security, Thaddeus twisted free, his Dampier healing already working. He ran, disappeared into the crowd, the side exit. Dorian turned to Evelina, took her hand, raised it to his lips, and kissed her knuckles. Before 500 witnesses. She is mine, he announced, his voice carrying through the hall. Under council law and human custom. Any who threaten her answer to me. The crowd erupted, some in shock, some in approval. But Avelina barely heard it. She was staring at Dorian, at the man who just publicly claimed her. And for the first time since sitting on his lap 2 weeks ago, she felt something other than fear. She felt chosen. Outside, as they descended the Met steps, flashes going off everywhere, a black car pulled up to the curb. Not their car. Council insignia on the door. Lady Morgana stepped out. Dorian Nightshade, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Avelina Thorne, get in. They had no choice. Inside the car, Morgana sat across from them, her expression unreadable. What you did tonight was clever and stupid. We exposed a threat, Dorian said. You exposed yourselves. 500 people witnessed a vampire claiming a human in public. Social media is already exploding. By morning, half of New York will be speculating about you. She turned her ice-cold gaze on Avelina. The council convenes at dawn, 6:17. You will both appear, and you will answer for this. Answer for what? Avelina demanded. We stopped Ravencroft. You violated the first law, Morgana said. Again, publicly. Dorian Nightshade has not just revealed his nature to you. He has announced to the world that vampires claim humans, that we exist in positions of power, that we are real. She leaned forward. The punishment is death for both of you, unless you can provide the council with a very compelling reason why you should live. The car stopped. They were back at the Nightshade estate. Morgana exited first. Dawn is at 6:17, 3 hours from now. If you have not presented yourselves to the council chambers by then, we will come for you, and we will not be merciful. She vanished into shadow. Dorian and Avelina stood alone in the driveway. 3 hours until dawn, 3 hours until judgment. They stood in Dorian's study, maps spread across the desk, legal documents, council bylaws written in languages older than English. Elias worked silently in the corner, brewing tea that Avelina wouldn't drink and blood that Dorian couldn't stomach. There has to be a precedent, Avelina said. She was still wearing the red dress from the Met, the rubies around her throat catching lamplight. In 300 years, there has to be one case where a vampire loved a human and they didn't have to choose between death or turning. There isn't, Dorian replied, his voice flat. He'd changed out of the tuxedo into simple black clothing. Combat ready. The first law is absolute. No human may know of our existence unless they become one of us. The Council interprets this strictly. Knowledge equals transformation or death. That's barbaric. That's survival. For 3,000 years, vampires have existed in shadow because we kept the secret. One loose thread unravels everything. Evelina slammed her hand on the desk. Then we don't give them a choice. We create a new thread, a new law. Dorian looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd sat on his lap 2 weeks ago, terrified and desperate. Now she stood in his study proposing to rewrite vampire law. What do you suggest? Human consort, she said, a formal title. A human who knows the secret, lives among vampires but remains human. Someone who serves a purpose. An envoy, a liaison, someone too valuable to kill. The Council won't accept it. It's unprecedented. So was the airplane once, so was democracy, so was everything that ever changed the world. She moved around the desk until she was directly in front of him. You told me courage makes me dangerous. So let's be dangerous. Dorian's hand came up to cup her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Cold, gentle. If this fails, they will execute us in front of the entire council. It will be public, brutal. A warning to any vampire who dares to love a human. If this works, Evelina countered, we change everything. He kissed her forehead. Then we burn brightly, one way or another. At 2:30 in the morning, the call came. Not from the council, from the estate's perimeter. Elias burst into the study. His usually composed face showed cracks of genuine alarm. Master Nightshade, we have a situation. Multiple hostiles, 30 at least, coming from the South Woods. Dorian was at the security monitors in seconds. The screens showed figures moving through the trees. Fast, too fast to be human. But not vampire fast either, something in between. Dampier. And leading them, clearly visible on the thermal cameras, was Thaddeus Ravencroft. His shoulder was still damaged from where Dorian had crushed it at the Met, but he was armed. They all were. Stakes, UV grenades, flamethrowers. He escaped from the Met and went straight to his army, Dorian said grimly. This is a suicide attack. He knows the council will execute him for exposure, so he's taking us with him. You'll be weak, Evelina breathed, looking at the clock. 2:35, sunrise at 6:17. Almost dawn. That's the point. Dorian's jaw tightened. Thaddeus knows I have to present to the council at dawn. He's forcing me to choose. Fight him now when I'm vulnerable, or flee and be declared fugitive. What about the guards? Human, daylight security. They can't fight 30 Dampier. He turned to Elias. Get the staff to the panic room. Seal it from inside. And you, sir? I stay. This is my territory, my home. He looked at Evelina. But you need to run. Take the tunnels under the estate. They lead to no. Dorian's eyes flashed black. Dangerous. This is not negotiable, Evelina. Thaddeus wants you dead. Your purifier blood is the only thing that can destroy his Dampier army. He will kill you. Then I'll die fighting. She pulled the silver dagger from her thigh holster. Elias had insisted she wear it under the dress. You taught me how to use this. Let me use it. You are not a soldier. Neither were you once. She held his gaze. I'm not running anymore. Not from Caspian. Not from the council. And not from Thaddeus Ravencroft. For a long moment, Dorian said nothing. Then he pulled her close, kissed her hard, desperately, like it might be the last time. Stay behind me, he growled against her lips. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood. Understood. The attack came as the first gray light of pre-dawn touched the sky. Windows exploded inward. UV grenades rolled across marble floors. Smoke filled the foyer. The grand staircase became a battlefield. Dorian moved like death itself. Even weakened by approaching sunrise, he was faster than anything human. He caught the first Dampier by the throat, snapped its neck, and threw the body into two more climbing through the window. But there were too many. For every one he killed, 3 more came. They were coordinated, military trained. Thaddeus had prepared them well. Evelina fought beside Elias. The butler moved with surprising grace for a man who looked 60. He was older than he appeared. Much older. Vampire, she realized. One of Dorian's creations who'd survived the turning. A Dampier lunged at her. She dodged, brought the silver dagger up. It caught the creature in the ribs, not deep enough to kill, but enough to make it scream. The blood splashed on her hand. The Dampier convulsed, collapsed, its skin turning gray, desiccating like a corpse left in the sun. Evelina stared at her bloodied hand. Her blood, her purifier blood. Elias, she shouted over the chaos. My blood kills them. The butler's eyes widened. Understanding dawned. The daggers coat them. Evelina didn't hesitate. She dragged the blade across her palm. Blood welled dark red and thick. She smeared it on the silver. Then she started hunting. Each dampier she cut with the blood-coated blade went down, paralyzed, their hybrid physiology unable to process the purifier blood. It was poison to them kryptonite. Within minutes, 10 dampier lay twitching on the floor. But Avelina was bleeding heavily now, her palm a mess of torn skin. She was getting lightheaded. And then the front wall exploded. Not from grenades, from fire. Blue fire that burned cold instead of hot. Seraphine Bloodworth stepped through the flames. She looked different from the attack 2 weeks ago. Calmer, more controlled, her platinum hair pulled back. Her crimson coat replaced with something darker. Simpler. She looked at the carnage, at Dorian bleeding from a dozen wounds, at Avelina swaying on her feet, dagger in hand. Well, Seraphine said, her silk razor voice cutting through the smoke. This is a mess. Dorian positioned himself between Seraphine and Avelina, ready to fight his maker to the death. But Seraphine raised her hands, empty, non-threatening. I'm not here to fight you, darling. I'm here to help. Why? Dorian's voice was pure suspicion. Because 300 years is a long time to be angry. And I'm tired. She looked at Avelina. And because she's right, you are different with her. Better. She turned her attention to the remaining Dompier, 20 of them regrouping near the destroyed foyer. I never liked Thaddeus Ravencroft, Seraphine continued. Arrogant little half-breed. Thinks he can build a new world order. Pathetic. She flicked her wrist. Blue fire erupted from her palms, not attacking Dorian, attacking the Dampier. They screamed, burned, ran. Seraphine and Dorian fought side by side, maker and child. The way they had centuries ago before obsession and control twisted their bond. Avelina watched from the stairs, too weak from blood loss to fight, but conscious enough to see Thaddeus Ravencroft emerge from the smoke. He looked like hell, his expensive suit torn, his face covered in cuts, his broken shoulder hanging at an odd angle, but his eyes were clear, focused, and locked on Avelina. You, he snarled, you ruined everything, my life's work, my army, my future. He raised a gun, not silver bullets, UV rounds, designed to explode on impact, to flood a vampire's body with ultraviolet radiation from inside. He aimed at Dorian's back. Avelina didn't think. She threw herself down the stairs, slammed into Dorian just as Thaddeus fired. The UV round hit her instead. The pain was instantaneous, white-hot agony exploding in her shoulder. She screamed, collapsed, but she didn't burn. The UV round fizzled out against her skin. Her purifier blood neutralized it. Dorian roared, a sound that shattered the remaining windows. He moved faster than light, crossed the distance to Thaddeus in a blink, grabbed the Dampier by the throat, lifted him off the ground. You shot her, Dorian growled, his voice barely human. You shot my Avelina. His hand tightened. Thaddeus's face turned purple. His feet kicked uselessly. Dorian, stop, Avelina's voice, weak but clear. Dorian turned his head, eyes completely black, lost to rage. Don't kill him, she said. Please. He tried to kill you. And if you kill him, you become the monster everyone thinks you are. She pulled herself to her feet, swaying. There's been enough death, enough blood, enough revenge. He deserves to die. Maybe, but you deserve to be better. Dorian looked at Thaddeus, at the Dampier choking in his grip, then at Avelina, at the woman who'd thrown herself in front of a bullet for him. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered Thaddeus to the ground, but didn't let go. Speak, Dorian commanded. Why do you hate me so much? We've been rivals for 30 years, but this is personal. This is deeper than business. Thaddeus coughed, gasped for air. You really don't remember, do you? Remember what? 1974, New York, a subway platform. Dorian went very still. You were feeding, drunk on blood and power. You found a woman, pregnant, 8 months. The color drained from Dorian's face. You bit her, Thaddeus continued, his voice breaking. You bit her, drank your fill, and left her to die in a pool of blood on the platform. But she didn't die, not right away. She made it to the hospital, gave birth, then died. He looked up at Dorian with eyes full of 50 years of pain. That baby changed by your venom in the womb was me. I am your son. Silence. Complete absolute silence. Even Seraphine had stopped moving, staring. No, Dorian whispered. No, I would remember. You were blackout drunk on blood. You've admitted to 15 women you turned and abandoned. What's one more one you didn't even know was pregnant? Thaddeus laughed bitterly. I grew up in foster care, neither human nor vampire, rejected by both, watched my files, knew what killed my mother, vampire bite. Spent 50 years building an empire just to have the power to hurt you the way you hurt me by existing. He spat blood at Dorian's feet. I am your legacy nightshade, your greatest sin made flesh. Dorian released him, stepped back, his hands shaking. I did not know, he said, his voice hollow. If I had known, you would have killed me, like you killed the others. No, Dorian dropped to his knees. No, I would have raised you, protected you, been a father. Liar. He's not lying. Evelina limped forward, positioned herself between father and son. Dorian Nightshade has done terrible things. He's carried 15 deaths for 200 years. But he's not the same vampire who killed your mother. People change, Thaddeus, even immortals. She looked at Thaddeus. You've spent 50 years hating him, building armies, destroying lives, all for revenge. But revenge doesn't fill the hole, does it? It just makes it bigger. And a tear streamed down Thaddeus's face. Real tears. Human tears. He abandoned me. He didn't know about you, but he knows now. She turned to Dorian. Tell him. Tell your son what you should have said 50 years ago. Dorian looked up at Thaddeus, at the Dampier who was his child, product of his worst moment, his greatest shame. I am sorry, Dorian said, each word breaking something inside him. I am sorry for your mother, for your suffering, for every moment of loneliness and pain you endured because I was too drunk on power to care about consequences. He stood, slowly, like an old man. You have every right to hate me, to want me dead, but I am asking you as your father to choose differently. Choose to be better than I was. Choose to break the cycle. He opened his arms. Kill me if you must, but let it end with me. Let the hatred die here. Thaddeus stared at those open arms, at the father who'd never held him, never comforted him, never even known he existed. He pulled a knife from his belt. Silver. Deadly. Avelina tensed, ready to intervene. But Thaddeus didn't stab Dorian. He dropped the knife and collapsed into his father's arms, sobbing like the child he'd never been allowed to be. Dorian held him, this broken, angry, lost creature who was his son. He held him tight and whispered apologies in languages older than America. French, Spanish, Latin. Seraphine watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her own face. You've changed, Dorian, she said softly. You've finally learned what I couldn't teach you in 300 years. Love is not possession, it's sacrifice. But even as Dorian held his son, even as Thaddeus's rage began to crack and break, the Dampier's hand moved to a device on his belt. Remote detonator. Avelina saw it a half-second before he pressed the button. No, she screamed. The estate erupted. Thaddeus had rigged the entire building. C4 in the walls, in the foundations. A suicide attack. If he couldn't have peace, he'd have mutual destruction. Dorian threw himself over both Avelina and Thaddeus. Seraphine created a dome of fire shielding them from debris. The explosion tore through the Nightshade estate like the wrath of God. 300 years of history crumbling in seconds. When the dust settled, Avelina was pinned under Dorian's body. He wasn't moving. Dorian, she gasped. Dorian, she pushed at him. Dead weight, impossibly heavy. Elias appeared through the smoke, helped her lift. Rolled Dorian onto his back. His chest was torn open. A steel rebar had punched through his back and out his front, missing his heart by inches. But the damage was catastrophic. Black blood pooled beneath him. Too much blood. He's dying, Elias said, his voice breaking for the first time. Master Nightshade is dying. Seraphine knelt beside them, placed her hand over the wound, her fire trying to cauterize. But it wasn't working. The injury was too severe. He needs blood, Seraphine said. Ancient blood, maker blood, but I gave too much last time I healed him. I don't have enough left. She looked at Avelina. Your purifier blood. It healed him before, the burns I gave him. That was a small wound. It's all we have. Avelina didn't hesitate. She bit her own wrist, tore the skin with her teeth. Blood welled dark and thick. She pressed it to Dorian's lips. Drink, she commanded. Drink, damn you. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Dorian's throat moved, swallowing, his body responding on instinct. The purifier blood hit his system like lightning. The wound began to close. Not instantly, but visibly. The torn flesh knitting together. The black blood slowing, stopping. Color returned to his face. His eyes fluttered open. "Avelina," he breathed, "you taste like sunrise." She laughed through tears. "You're delusional. Deliriously in love with you." She kissed him, tasting her own blood on his lips, not caring. A groan came from nearby. Thaddeus. He lay under fallen stone, barely breathing, his Dampier healing factor struggling against injuries too severe to repair. Dorian pulled himself up, limped over to his son, knelt beside him. "I forgive you," Dorian said quietly, "for all of it, the attacks, the bombing, the hatred. I forgive you because I understand it, and because you are my son. And I failed you first." Thaddeus's eyes found his father's. "I don't want to die angry," he whispered. "Then don't. Choose peace. Will you stay until the end?" "I will stay." Dorian held Thaddeus's hand as the sun rose, as the first true daylight in hours touched the ruins of the Nightshade estate, as his son, his child, his greatest sin and deepest regret finally let go. The council arrived as the sun cleared the horizon. 13 vampires materialized in the smoking ruins shielded by umbrellas and protective gear. Led by Lady Morgana, their faces masks of controlled fury. "Dorian Nightshade," Morgana began, "you were summoned to appear before." She stopped, saw the destruction, the bodies, Dorian holding a dead Dampier, Avelina standing beside him bloodied but defiant, Seraphine Bloodworth maker of the accused present as witness. "What happened here?" "Thaddeus Ravencroft happened," Avelina said. She stepped forward, still wearing the red dress now torn and stained. The rubies around her throat cracked, but still present. "He attacked with 30 Dampier. Tried to kill us. We defended ourselves." "And him," Morgana gestured to the body in Dorian's arms. "My son," Dorian said quietly. "I didn't know. For 50 years I didn't know." He laid Thaddeus down gently, stood to face the council. "I have violated your laws. I have revealed our nature to a human. I have claimed her publicly. I have loved her openly." His voice grew stronger. "And I do not repent." The council members shifted, hands going to weapons. "Then you accept the sentence of death." "No," Avelina moved to stand beside Dorian, took his hand. "We offer the council an alternative, a new law, human consort, a title for humans who know our secret but remain human, who serve a purpose valuable enough to warrant protection." "Unprecedented," one council member spat. "So was the printing press," Avelina countered. "So was electricity. So was every single thing that pushed civilization forward. You can't hide in shadows forever. The world is changing. Technology makes secrets harder to keep. Soon humans will discover you with or without people like me. Wouldn't you rather have allies, humans who understand you, who can navigate the daylight world on your behalf?" "And what purpose do you serve?" Morgana asked. "I stopped Thaddeus Ravencroft. I discovered purifier blood can neutralize Dampier. I prevented a war between your species and his hybrid army." She held up her bloodied palm. "I am rare, 1 in 10 million, and I am proof that humans and vampires can coexist, can love, can build something better than endless cycles of secrecy and slaughter." She looked at each council member in turn. "You can kill us, execute us as example, but you'd be killing the future. The first step toward a world where vampires don't have to hide, where you can live openly, protected by law, integrated into society." "Madness," another council member hissed. "Humans would hunt us to extinction." "Some would," Avelina agreed, "but others would see you as I do, as people. Dangerous, yes, but people. Worthy of rights and protections." She squeezed Dorian's hand. "I'm not asking you to reveal yourselves tomorrow. I'm asking you to consider one human consort, one trial case. Let me live as Dorian's partner, his equal, his liaison to the human world. If it fails, you can execute us then. But if it succeeds, you've created a new precedent, a bridge between our worlds." The council deliberated. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of Avelina and Dorian standing in the ruins, hands clasped, waiting for judgment. Finally, Morgana returned. "The council has decided. By a vote of 7-6, we accept your proposal. Human consort status is granted to Avelina Thorne. She may know our secrets, live among us, serve as liaison, but she remains human. Any attempt to turn her without council approval results in immediate execution." She fixed them both with her ice-cold stare. "This is a trial. One mistake, one breach of trust, and the experiment ends, along with your lives. Do you accept these terms?" "We do," they said in unison. "Then it is done. The first law is amended. Let it be recorded that on this day, November 3rd, 2024, the Council of 13 recognized the first human consort in 3,000 years of vampire history. Morgana turned to leave, then paused. Make it work, Dorian, for all our sakes. They rebuilt, not the estate. That was too damaged. Instead, Dorian purchased a penthouse in Manhattan, 57th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows with UV-blocking glass, modern, sleek, a new beginning. 3 months later, Avelina stood in a boardroom on the 42nd floor of Nightshade Enterprises. She wore a black suit, tailored, professional, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Around her neck, the repaired ruby choker, a reminder of where she'd been, what she'd survived. Gentlemen, she addressed the 12 men sitting at the conference table. I'm Avelina Thorne, CEO of Nightshade's Daylight Operations. As of today, we're acquiring Ravencroft Holdings' remaining assets. The fertility clinics will be shut down, the women and children will be relocated to ethical facilities, and the Dhampir who survive, they'll be offered a choice: integration into vampire society or relocation to a sanctuary where they can live without persecution. One executive raised his hand, and Nightshade himself. Will continue as CEO of Nocturnal Operations. I handle sunrise to sunset. He handles sunset to sunrise. It's a new model, but it works. After the meeting, she returned to the penthouse. Dorian was awake, standing on the balcony, looking out over Manhattan as the sun set behind New Jersey. She joined him. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, still cold, always cold, but she'd grown to love that chill. It meant safety, protection, home. How was your day, he asked. Productive. Closed the Ravencroft deal. Fired 3 executives for embezzling. Made $6 million in stock trades. She leaned back against him. You slept. Dreamed of you. Vampires don't dream. Then I imagined, vividly. She turned in his arms, looked up at his face. 3 months and he still took her breath away. The sharp features, the dark eyes with gold flecks, the hint of danger that never quite disappeared. Seraphine sent a postcard, Dorian said. From Paris, she's in hibernation. Won't wake for 100 years. Before she left, she performed the severance ritual. I'm free of the maker bond. How does that feel? Strange, like a weight I didn't know I was carrying is gone. He kissed the top of her head. I am my own creature now, for the first time in 317 years. And what will you do with that freedom? Spend it with you. A month later, they returned to the ruins of the Nightshade estate. It had been cleared, the bodies removed, the rubble catalogued, but Dorian wanted one last visit before selling the land. They stood where the foyer had been, where Seraphine had attacked, where Avelina had dropped a statue on a vampire twice her age. I'm glad it's gone, Dorian said. Too many ghosts, too much history. That place was built on loneliness and power. This us, we deserve something built on choice. Agreed. They walked to the cliff edge, looked out over the Hudson, the water dark and churning, Manhattan twinkling in the distance. I have a question, Dorian said. Avelina tensed, turned to face him. He didn't kneel, didn't pull out a ring, just took both her hands in his. I want forever with you, Avelina Thorne. I want every sunrise and sunset, every laugh and tear, every victory and failure. But I will not take your choice from you. He looked into her eyes. I can offer you immortality, one bite, one transformation, and you would be like me, powerful, undying. We would have eternity together. He paused. Or you can remain human, age naturally, experience life as it was meant to be experienced. Brief, precious, finite, and I will stay by your side for every moment of it, until your last breath. And then I will continue alone, carrying the memory of you for the rest of time. He squeezed her hands. The choice is yours. What do you want? Avelina looked at him, at this ancient, powerful, terrifying, wonderful creature who'd learned to love her enough to offer freedom. Ask me again in 50 years, she said. Dorian blinked. What? I want to grow old with you, Dorian. I want to live a full human life, experience everything, the good and the ordinary them. She smiled. And then when I'm 75 and facing my last years, if you still want me, if you still love me after watching me age and weaken, then ask again. And maybe I'll say yes, or maybe I'll say no. Maybe I'll choose to die human to prove that love doesn't need forever to be real. Tears, bloody tears, streaked down Dorian's face. You would make me wait 50 years. I would make you prove that this is more than fascination. I want to be chosen every day for 50 years, not just once in a moment of passion. Dorian pulled her close, held her like she might disappear. 50 years, he whispered into her hair. I have waited 317 years to find you. What is 50 more? He pulled back, cupped her face, kissed her softly. You are remarkable, Avelina Thorne, not because of your blood. Not because you're rare, but because you know your worth, and you make me work for the privilege of loving you. Good, she said. You've been coasting on cheekbones and danger for too long. He laughed, a real, genuine laugh that echoed over the river. Then I will work, every day, for 50 years, and at the end I will ask again, and whatever you choose, I will honor it. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss as the sun set behind them, as the stars came out. As the world turned and time marched forward, Avelina Thorne had sat on a vampire king's lap to escape a toxic past, but she stayed beside him on her own 2 feet to build an extraordinary future. The Queen of Shadows didn't need forever to rule. She just needed today, and tomorrow, and the next day. One human lifetime, with a vampire who finally learned that love is measured not in years but in moments, and they had millions of moments ahead of them, even if they weren't infinite.